Hello everyone, this is Al Fadi and I'd like to welcome you back to another episode of this exciting series that we've decided to call Gibson's Latest Discoveries for obvious reasons. Our brother Dan Gibson has been definitely doing a lot of groundbreaking discoveries as it relates to the questionable origin and history of Islam as we know it. And in last week we talked really briefly about the name of the God of Islam and a possible origin for that. Today we're going to continue to unpack this, and we will address, of course, the famous shrine known as the Kaaba, and we'll continue from there. Jay, thank you again, as always, for joining me. Something interesting, by the way, that I want to touch on. Last week, of course, you talked about Allat, and that's the feminine name for the goddess, who supposedly is the wife for Al-Ilah, who is the name for what we know as Allah. But doesn't this indicate a polytheistic God versus the monotheistic God that we keep hearing about?
I knew you would go to that. I knew that you would probably put two and two together, and you're correct. If Allah, Ilaha, which is generic title for Dushara, the formal name of God, we have the same thing in the Bible for our God. Yahweh is his personal name, but his generic title would be Elohim, or Eloha, plural, or Eloi, my God, singular. So therefore, we have the same thing in Hebrew. The same thing exists, and we know that Eloi or Eloha, Elohim, would be the generic title for Yahweh. So because of that, we can see why when you have Dushara as the formal name, the personal name for God, there's that temple that we showed of Dushara. His title, Ilaha, as we know, when you put the definite article, becomes Allah, the God. If that is the case, then Muslims always put one finger up. They always say one finger whenever they're doing their videos, the oneness of God. This is Tawheed. This is to say Tawheed. God is one. He is only one. If he's only one, then they better not use Allah. They better want to get rid of Allah. They better get rid of Ilaha, because that Dushara has a wife, Aluza, whose temple we saw on the map. And also we saw her images, Alat, which is the generic for Aluza. So God has a wife.
And I would argue the very passage or the very chapter that our Muslim friends always use, chapter 112, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدْ, there is no God but Allah. The word ahad meaning one of, not an absolute one. So he's competing with other gods, and he's declaring that I am the one.
Doesn't he also say we all the way through?
Oh, absolutely.
Does he refer to himself in the plural tense all the way through? We've always wondered what that was. Could that be that it's referring to him, he and his consort, which goes against chapter 6, verse 101, says God has no consort? Well, it looks like there's a huge confusion. There's a huge contradiction. And also, isn't this by nature a commitment of shirk? It's committing the shirk, the unforgivable sin, where you cannot equate anybody else with God but God must always remain one?
That's right. But at best, he has a multi-person here. He's a multi-person God. You cannot argue with me and tell me he's one.
No longer.
Exactly.
You better put two fingers up.
At least.
No longer one. Two. Yeah. 1, 2. Now, the thing is, more than that, can you then also see that they have got, whoever wrote the Quran, it looks like they're influenced by the Nabateans. They're influenced by Petra, which also pushes this up into Petra much more so. And it also suggests they have got not only a polytheistic God, they have got a pagan God.
That's right.
I thank God for the Bible. We don't have that problem. We do
the
not
Bible
have a pagan
exposes
God.
pagan gods all the time.
It says very clearly, remember, Muslims always like to go and take me back to Deuteronomy 18, and they say this is proof that Muhammad is there because he's right there in Deuteronomy 18, where God, in verse 17, Yahweh, there's his name, Yahweh says to Moses, I will send someone like you from amongst your brothers. That must be the Israelites. But then he says, beware of anybody who comes in the name of other gods. And if he does not come in the name of mine, it doesn't come in my name. What's his name? Look at verse 17. Yahweh. If he comes in the name of other gods,
put to death.
Verse 20. What does he say?
Put to death.
Must be put to death.
Right.
Therefore, if we're going to follow the Bible, which I do and which you do, if they want to go to Deuteronomy 18, verse 19 and verse 20, read all three verses together, we're to put to death anybody that comes in the name of other gods, especially if that God is polytheistic, as we now know Ilaha is with Alat, and we also know that God is pagan, and therefore we're not to have anything to do with Allah.
And
at all.
it goes back to the argument I said, recognizing that just calling him ilah is really not defined. When you add the definite article al, making it Allah, now you're making it sound like he is the one.
The one.
But still doesn't negate the fact that he represents a team of gods.
Certainly another one who is his wife, Alat, who is also known as Aluza. Now, what I want to do now is move into the next area, and that is the pilgrimage. You have done the pilgrimage. That's why it's so good to have you here, because I want you to really unpack this for us. You were a Muslim. You lived very close to Jeddah. You were right there in the Hijaz. So you come from the same area. Supposedly that this is all gone. So when you did the pilgrimage, you went to the Kaaba, did you not?
Yeah, you have to start there, really. You go there and you do certain rituals, of course, and from there you can go then that night, or at least first thing in the morning, you would end up going, depending, of course, on traffic, and it gets extremely crowded. You would go to Mount Arafat. Supposedly, that's where, after the fall, Adam and Eve ended up meeting. That's why it's called Mount Arafat, the place where they ended up reuniting. And you will stand there, all day, technically speaking, and, praising God and shouting, certain rituals. And then at nighttime, of course, you will go from there, and then the next morning is the beginning of what we call the Adha, celebration, the sacrifice celebration or feast, or the feast of the sacrifice, in memory of who? Abraham wanting to offer his son as a sacrifice. So you start by slaughtering, basically the lamb for what? For the forgiveness of sin, technically speaking, on behalf of yourself and your family. And then you go from there to Muzdalifah, which is Mina, basically, and you start, the action of throwing stones at the pillars that represent Satan, supposedly trying to tempt Abraham not to take his son for sacrifice. That's at least one theory. There's so many other theories about that, and you do this either one day, and then you have others doing it, the other days, or you can do all of them in 3 days, and then you close by coming back to, technically speaking, at the end, of all of that to Mecca and the Kaaba once.
So those are the stages. They take about 3 days.
I'm summarizing it basically in general.
Now, what's fascinating, Gibson has looked at this, and he says, what's fascinating, you can find every one of those stages in Petra. And what's more fascinating, they actually fit Petra better than they fit Mecca.
Right.
So what does he do? Well, let's look at the Kaaba. Let's put up there the Kaaba that you see there. This is the Kaaba in Petra. And you can see it's got a little mihrab there. Well, that we don't know if he's put that mihrab there, but that could have been put in at a later date. What we do know is that Kaaba, when you look at the dimensions of that Kaaba, you will see that it fits exactly to the dimensions that Azraqi refers to in the traditions when he refers to the dimensions of the Kaaba. The dimensions for the walls and the size and shape exactly fit that Kaaba. If you look at what Azraqi, who is the earliest we see of any reference to a dimension of the Kaaba, they don't fit the present-day Meccan Kaaba. What does that tell you?
Interesting. Of course, we're starting to unearth a lot of things that fit this Petra narrative.
Okay, so the red line is 14.6 meters. That's the location, and look at the location. It's you can see that this Kaaba is in the middle of Petra. It also has buildings around it which look like old temples, which is exactly what we see in the traditions, that there were buildings around it. These are all other temples and other places of religious significance for them. That's exactly what you find in Petra. When we go from there, we want to go to the other two hills, which we know as Safa and Marwa. So let's put that up there. There you can see the Safa and Marwa. But let's take a look and see what we see in modern day Mecca. That's explain the Safa and Marwa. What are they exactly? I'm on the right upper hand. Look at the green old mosque. That's an old picture of the mosque. It no longer in Mecca. That's what it used to look like before they covered it all up. And there you can see on the left side the Safa at the top and Marwa at the bottom.
Right, and this is kind of like an offshoot coming out of the holy mosque, technically speaking. It's almost like a really, literally a running track. You run in one direction between the two mounts, and you turn around and you run again. But usually You walk until you get to a certain point and you start running, and then you walk again, and then you turn around and you walk, then you run, basically, and walk all the way, and you
like
turn.
fart
You do it
legs, like we used to do when we were practicing for cross country. Okay,
Right.
so you can see a picture of them doing that there in the bottom picture. There they are with their dress for the occasion. That on the left picture, you can see where the Safa and Marwa are in a more modern rendition. That's what it looks like today. So you can't really see Safa and Marwa. They are not as distinct as the old mosques used to be. That's the Safa and Marwa. But the problem is, what do we know about the story of Safa, and what is going on with Safa and Marwa? What are they exactly?
Well, the tradition says that they used to be lovers, and because they ended up desecrating this holy place by having an affair in there, God cursed them and petrified them, basically. One was petrified on one mount and became that one mount, technically, or named after that person. And then the other one also either was in that place or named after him as well.
Okay, but and then the tradition goes on to refer to Hagar.
Yes, where we get to the running part of things is that Hagar, technically speaking, and Ibn Kathir, by the way, talks about this as well, along with other commentators, and Ibn Abbas says that she was there in that area. She had her baby son, Ishmael, with her, and he was crying, he's thirsty, and she really left him over there and walked away from him because she couldn't bear, watch him, being, going through this pain of thirst. And she found this mount, one of them. She went up that mountain to look at the valley to see if there is any water. Makes sense, And, I used to when I grew up, they would tell me she would see a mirage because it was so hot, obviously, and she thinks there's water in there. So she would go down the mountain and run towards what she thought the water is, and she discovered, to her disappointment, there is nothing in there. So she goes up the other mountain and looks the same way, and she did that 7 times, and that's where the tradition comes from.
Okay, so that's where they wrong back. It's to commemorate what happened to Hagar in the desert as she's driven out because of this animosity between Ishmael and Isaac, or animosity between Sarah and Hagar. Right. So that's to commemorate that.
Correct.
Now, what's fascinating, are there mountains there?
When you go to the actual location that we're showing here on the screen, this offshoot that is coming out of the Holy Mosque, there is no mountain. There's like pieces of rock that appears to be part of a mountain, but there is no mountain anymore. You're standing at that level, technically. I would argue if you want to climb that, maybe we're talking, let's say, I will say 10, 15 feet, maybe 20. That's about it. It's not a real mountain, just a side of a mountain. And I'm sure we can find images of this. Anyone can go and Google these things.
Okay. Now, so it's not really a mountain on either side, is it? It's just a few rocks.
Exactly.
Which could have been transported there, which could have been put there
Well, it
recently.
could be natural in there anyway. Either way.
Well, good old Gibson, Dan Gibson, I think he said he's been 50 times to Petra as he's been doing his discoveries. He's still going back to Petra. He has found where Safa and Marwa are, and there's a picture of it on the right. And what's fascinating, there is now a Christian church and a temple, an old temple that predate Islam, and that the Christian church that is Byzantine church that are on that same mountain. 2 completely different mountains. We only have a picture of one of them here that exactly fit what we're looking for. These are mountains, not just a few little rocks.
And you see a valley between them.
There's a valley over to the other mountain on the other side. Exactly what you would expect if it was the story of Hagar. And that would be where Hagar would have been. She would not went way down 600 miles further south. How did she get 600 miles? How did she walk 600 miles further south all by herself with the sun? This is much closer. This is right next door. This would be exactly where Abraham comes from. And so you can see, as we saw it earlier, when Abraham comes to her, he then talks to her. Why would he be doing way down in Mecca? He would be much further, further north.
There were routes that are identified for her to take on her way to Egypt, and this would have been on the way.
Okay. When we come back in the next episode, what I like to do is continue this. I like to go then with the Zamzam well, and then I would like to also go with the Jamarats, or the Muzdalifa.
Basically.
The stoning and the Muzdalifa.
Muzdalifa.
So I like to go in and unpack those. But for now, you can see already 2 of the stages that we're looking at. The Kaaba, where they circumambulate for 7 times, and also Marwa and Safa, where they go back and forth 7. That's interesting. 7, the number 7. Why is that significant?
There's a lot of things, here about number 7. You know, you circumvent around the Kaaba 7 times, you run 7 times, you do the stoning 7 times.
49, 72, all multiplications of 7.
That's right.
So there's something about 7, and that we would love to ask and see what the significance is. That's the Jewish perfect number, isn't it?
It is.
Looks like there has been some influence from Judaism, as we're going to find.
Cross-pollination.
Look at the prayers in the Quran. There are only 3 prayers. That's the Jewish number of prayers. These other 2 that they've added on to the evening are only found in the 9th century after 870 with Al-Bukhari. So you can see even that proves that this is an earlier rendition for an earlier time, much further north, looks like somewhere in Petra.
Right. Thank you so much, of course, as always, and I hope everyone is enjoying this particular series. Once again, we called it Gibson's Latest Discoveries for obvious reasons. Hopefully you can join us again next time. Until then, have a blessed day. Thank you for watching. Please like our video, and we encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, CIRA International. And be sure also to click the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we upload new videos into the channel. And finally, I like to prayerfully encourage you to become a patron through Patreon. Your giving is much needed and will enable us to produce more and more of videos like this so that we can publish them on a weekly basis. So thank you in advance.